I wanted to start out the new year, 2022, with a little bit of a different video than what I typically make. I make a lot of videos about specific Microsoft 365 tools like Microsoft Teams, OneDrive, Microsoft Stream, Yammer, SharePoint, but in my day job as a technology architect, I have to demonstrate a lot of these tools in live environments where I may not have the tools that I have in a video editing software like Camtasia. So over the past year, I found a lot of little utilities specific to macOS. I'm a Mac user that help me out with getting my point across in a live meeting or a live broadcast, a live stream. So I wanted to start out this year by sharing those tools with you and just some of my favorite things that I've found that help me day to day in my job as an architect. So without further ado, let's hop over to my screen and take a look at the bottom row of what's on my Elgato Stream Deck. So we're looking at my Stream Deck right here, and the bottom row is all of my utilities that help me out with doing demonstrations. I want to have them closest to the desk where my hand is, so it's the least amount of reaching that I have to do to press those buttons because I use them so frequently. And as we go from left to right, I have a dedicated key that helps me highlight my cursor. So we'll show that one first, but that helps me identify my cursor and draw people's attention to what I'm pointing at. Another button that helps me show what keystrokes I'm putting on screen. So if I'm doing an Alt Tab or I'm doing like a copy and paste, something like that, and I'm using keyboard shortcuts to get that across, I show my keystrokes on screen so that people can know what I'm actually pressing off my camera. The third one is the ability to show my camera on my screen, all native and integrated in a proper picture-in-picture with a little bit more control over the positioning and the size and the design than what we have today in Microsoft Teams with presenter modes. The fourth one we'll talk about is the ability to annotate my screen. I can draw lines, I can put boxes around things, and I can even do full whiteboarding just on top of my screen in a normal screen sharing environment with this utility right here. The last two that are purple, the one that says center and the one that says maximize, these are helpful little utilities that are keyboard shortcuts that are built into the Mac operating system. And they help me with getting my windows on screen to look nice and clean. So like say that this window is off screen just a little bit or it's off center. That kind of bothers me. I really like having everything, neat and centered for me. So rather than remembering this hotkey, which is, Control Alt C, I think, that centers the window within your screen that you have it on. Well, I don't want to remember that, so I dedicated a button that whenever I press my center button, it just moves it to the center of my screen, and then now I know I have perfect space all the way around it. The next one just simply maximizes it. It makes it full screen. So if I'm bringing over a window, like bringing over the App Store right here, I can just throw it on this monitor somewhere, and I know that I can press a button to center it, and I can press a button to fill up the whole screen if I want to. And that just kind of helps me get things lined up so I don't have to move it around and kind of futz with it a little bit. It just makes my life a lot easier. So diving into the actual utilities that I use that you can download and install yourself on your Mac operating system if you happen to be a Mac user. The first one is the one that I use the most, called Cursor Pro. And this is by a developer. I don't know how exactly to pronounce this, but the guy is ixeau.com. Ixeau? I don't know if that's how you actually pronounce it, but this guy, he's a developer from Germany and a designer from Germany that has just like some of the most beautiful software that I've ever seen on a Mac or otherwise. He has a great design aesthetic. I just really like using, as weird as it sounds, I really love using just the settings apps, little windows on his applications. It's just gorgeously designed software that does its job very, very well. And my favorite one of his, the one I use the most, is this right here, Cursor Pro. So we're going to click into that. And this is an App Store application. I believe it is, let's see how expensive it is. It is $8.99 on the Mac App Store. And for $9, this gives you the ability to highlight your cursor with a little ring. I've already done it a couple times here because it's so natural for me to just highlight an area of my screen by turning on this little cursor highlighter. And there's a lot of functionality and a lot of adjustability within this application. But the way that I personally use it is I have it mapped to a hotkey, and I just did, this is a huge, long hotkey that I designed, to do all of those special keys and then the M key as well. And that basically toggles it on and off. So I can press the button to turn it on and off. But what I've done is I found that I use this so frequently, turning it on and off, that I've actually mapped it to my Logitech MX Master 3 mouse. I've dedicated a button on this mouse to turning on the Cursor Pro so that I can highlight something on my screen. And the way that I do this is there's a button right here in the top center of the MX Master 3 mouse. This button is by default going to make it so that your wheel is either a smooth wheel or it's a clicky scroll wheel. Well, I found that I pretty much set it to what my preference is, and then I never touched that button again. So instead what I did is in the Logi options, so L-O-G-I options, inside of that utility or that application, I set that button in the center of my mouse to toggle on and off Cursor Pro from the Mac App Store. So now whenever I have my hand on my mouse, I simply press this button and it turns it on and off just like that. And I found that I actually use that more than the Stream Deck button. Now, my other favorite thing about this Cursor Pro application is the ability to use it to zoom in on things. Now, one thing that I've done to zoom in on my screen is I use the accessibility options in macOS, where I can hold down the control key and then I can zoom in and out on my entire screen. And that's pretty nice, but I find it a little bit disorienting sometimes. So what I found is inside of Cursor Pro, you can actually hold down a modifier key and it turns that little circle or that little highlighted area into a magnifying glass. So I can hold down, for me it's the control button, I can hold down the control key and then I can zoom in on just that portion of the screen, kind of like bringing a magnifying glass. And this is really helpful if I am referencing like, all right, we're going to click on the filters area. I can click on this control button to highlight the filters area, and people know that it's in that upper corner of this window because that's where my cursor is, and they can just punch in on it a little bit to see that it's the button called filters. So that's really helpful for me. If I go through the settings, let's open those up real quick. I'll show you how I have mine configured specifically here. So in my Cursor Pro settings, this is how my personal setup is configured. I have it set to a circle, but you can also do a square, or you can do it as a rhombus if you want to, and make it look a little bit more flair on it. I just like a circle. I have the size set to regular. The border is set to medium. The border style, it's a medium solid line. And then I like having this little glow around it. And I use what's called the cyberpunk glow. So there's a little bit of an internal glow inside of it that makes it look a little bit of a thicker highlight. And then I like to animate my clicks. So whenever I click on it, the circle kind of like animates and kind of bounces in a little bit. and I turned off the perspective warping. The way that that works is it will kind of tilt whenever you click. The animation will tilt in the direction of either a right click or it'll tilt for a left click. I turned that off because I found that a little bit jarring in some instances. And then for my colors, what I have is I have the cursor is set to a green. I found that that's a pretty good contrasting color for like the purple of Microsoft Teams or the blue of OneDrive, things like that. And then I have my right click set to a red. So whenever I right click on something, it turns the circle red for that click. And then my left click is a blue. So red, blue, and green for my three colors. Under the magnifier settings, what I have mine set to is I have it set to the control key. So when I press control on my keyboard, it magnifies that circle. And then the settings that I have is I have it set to be a large magnifier size. I want it to zoom in at a 3x magnification. And then I want the quality to be smooth. You can toggle it between smooth and crisp if you want to. I found that smooth looked a little bit nicer. And then triple is right in the middle between 1.5 and all the way up to 20x. That's way too much for me. 3x is a little bit, right in the middle. It works for me. And then the magnifier size, I just have it set to large. I want it to kind of pop up a little bit to show that I'm zooming in on something. So I have the circle physically get bigger whenever I press down that key. And then over here on the behavior, I just have it set to never hide. If I toggle this on, I want it to follow me as I move around on the screen. The beg for attention, if I set that, basically when you stop your mouse, it will kind of pulse. And I don't really want to do that. So I don't want it to be too distracting. So I just set both of those to never. And then I set up a hotkey because I'm using a Stream Deck to toggle this on and off. I basically had every single modifier and then the M key for mouse. And I figured like if I used every single modifier key, there's almost no likelihood that that's going to be a shortcut in another application. So I'm pretty safe at using that for this need. And then I also show it in my status bar, and I always launch the app on login. So that is my number one favorite app is called Cursor Pro. It allows me to zoom in on things and just kind of orient people to the screen a lot easier. The second one that I have is this keyboard button. Now, whenever I press that, it gives me the ability to show my keystrokes on screen. So say that I'm doing like a Command C, a Command V for copy and paste. If I press that on my keyboard and I forget to say that I'm pressing Command C and Command V, people won't know necessarily what key combination I just did. So if I toggle that on and I hit Control C and then Control V, you actually see that it puts the keyboard, the keystrokes on the screen in the center of my screen right there. So I'm hitting Command C over and over again. I can hit Control C. And I find that this is really helpful for, I fly around and I do a lot of keyboard shortcuts a lot. It kind of makes it so that people don't miss out on what I'm doing outside of my camera view. So if we go over here to, this is called Keystroke Pro, I believe. Yep, Keystroke Pro. It's by the same guy, Martin, who does all of these applications. And Keystroke Pro is, let's see how expensive that one is. It is also $8.99 on the Mac App Store in the US. And there's a lot of functionality here. I typically keep it pretty basic on my configuration. I mostly just want to show the keyboard shortcuts, which means there's usually some type of modifier involved. I don't want to show every single keystroke. So let's take a look at what the settings look like on my configuration for Keystroke Pro. It's this little icon up here at the top that kind of looks like the little command icon. And we'll jump into the settings for this. And what I have here is I have it set to only show the keystrokes with a modifier key. You can turn it so that you can show all keystrokes or to show keystrokes and special keys. I'm not quite sure. Special keys, I assume that's like the F1 through F12 keys. I only care about if I'm doing Command C, Command V, something like that. So I just have it set to the middle option. And then my hotkey, again, I used every single modifier, and then the letter K, because this is for my keyboard. Up here on appearance, I have it set to skeuomorphism. So I kind of like that realistic look and feel to my keystroke being presented on the screen. You can also set it to a minimal look if you want, and that looks just a little bit different. You can set it to edgy, which has a little bit of a harder square edge to the buttons, or this M0110A, which is a little bit of like a rounded edges, kind of like a retro looking style. I just like the skeuomorph. I think this looks a little bit the most like a mechanical keyboard, honestly. The size, I just went with medium. The transition, I wanted just a tick. I kind of wanted it just to pop on and pop off. And then I have it just set to the middle of the road for the duration. And my colors and everything, I just selected the default. I have aluminum, the gray for the modifier key. I have a green for the escape key. I almost never press escape, so you never see green. And then the border is the like space gray color for me. And then on the display, you can choose where you want to show this on your screen. I have mine set to be right in the top center of my laptop screen. And then I'm not showing it at all on my big ultra wide screen because I never share my ultra wide screen in a Teams meeting. I only share it on my laptop screen. That's the only screen that I ever share inside of a Teams meeting. So that's where I want my keyboard keystrokes to show. And I have them up here in the very top. You can see up here at the top. I have them up there because that's kind of out of the way. If I'm demonstrating like Microsoft Teams or something like that, it's up in that like search bar area of the title bar. And I find that that just doesn't obstruct anything that I'm trying to show. So that is Keystroke Pro, and it's $9 on the App Store. And it's a little bit less used because I don't do a whole lot of like trying to like teach people keyboard shortcuts, but it's there if I need it. And I'm going to turn it back off. The third one that I wanted to talk about is also by this guy, Martin, out of Berlin. And that is something called Mirror Magnet. And this allows me to have my camera on screen without having to worry about doing like standout mode or reporter mode inside of the Teams meeting. If I'm using OBS, if I'm doing a Teams meeting or a live stream or recording a video, it works across everything because my video picture-in-picture is physically on my screen. No matter what else is happening, my picture is there. And when I press that button, this is what it looks like. So it's a little, it's a rounded corners. I kind of like having a rounded square in the corner. And what I like about this app the best is that whenever I say I'm covering up part of an application and I wanted to show people in Microsoft Teams, here's how you go and you report a problem. It's in the lower left corner. There's a button called Help. So I'm going to move my cursor into the lower corner of my screen. And I normally would be covering that area, but with Mirror Magnet, it's aware of where my cursor is. So as I get closer to it, it automatically hides my picture-in-picture for me so I can show that area of the screen. And when I move my mouse back out, my camera naturally just transitions back onto screen and you can see me. So this is Mirror Magnet. I want to say that it's like $11 or $12 maybe. It's his newest application. No, it's also just $9 on the App Store. So we're looking at 3 applications from this guy. They're all $9 each on the Mac App Store. So that is mirror magnet. I want to show you how I have mine configured. So we'll go into the settings for mirror magnet. Let's put that over here on the screen and center it. And get my dock out of the way. There we go. So in mirror magnet, the way I have it configured is I have it set to launch at login. I don't want to fumble for where it is or remember what the name is. It's always there. And then for the hotkey, I just have, again, every single modifier. And then I used the C key right here because that's for my camera. I've got M for mouse, K for keyboard, C for camera. Remember, I never actually press these keys. I mapped it on a Stream Deck so that I can press a button on a Stream Deck that has a picture-in-picture window on it. So I know what it's going to do. I don't have to remember what the keyboard shortcut is. And then for the camera settings up here, I have it set obviously to my CamLink 4K. This is, it's locked to this particular camera. I don't ever have to worry when I press this button if it's going to be my FaceTime camera or some other weird virtual cam. It's my best quality camera, the one that you're looking at right now with the Sony A6400 attached. I have it set just to normal video quality, so just right in the middle. I find that this definitely looks good enough. If you're doing an integrated webcam or a USB webcam, you might want to turn up the quality to best quality if you find that it's a little bit fuzzy or not looking super great. Because this is a mirrorless camera, normal is plenty. My zoom is 100%. I don't really want to zoom and crop anything, so I just left it at 100. And then this is an interesting feature, the flip video thing. I found that my laptop is physically off to my left. So what I wanted is I'm going to be in my left corner of my screen. And when I'm looking at my laptop screen, I want it to look like I'm looking at the window that I'm talking about. So I want my gaze to be this direction toward the window that I'm looking at. And if you find that that doesn't work, or when you're looking at your presentation screen, that you're looking away from what the audience is looking at, this button right here to flip the video allows you to turn yourself around so that you're facing toward the content. And if I turn that off, this is what it looks like. So if I had that enabled, you would see that it looks like I'm looking off of the screen to somewhere else in my office. Well, I want it to look mentally like I'm looking at the thing I'm talking about. So I unchecked that in my situation. If your laptop is over on the other side or it's down below, you might just play with that setting and see what looks best to you. But that's the rationale for why you might want to flip your video. And then you can even control your saturation, brightness, contrast, and your hue inside of this app. So if it's like a little bit too, grainy looking or it's not colorful enough, you can really dial up the saturation. Now it looks like I have makeup on or something. Thing is though, I've dialed in my camera settings to work for this lighting setup because I control everything in my home office. So I just have everything set to standard 100%. But if you want to tune your camera a little bit, you can do it inside of this app without any extra utility. Now for the appearance, I have it set to a heavily rounded rectangle. You can have a little bit less rounded corners, or you can go all the way to a full circle if you want to. And again, it automatically hides, which is really sweet. What I did is I went heavily rounded rectangle. I like to have a square format. You can have it be 16:9 if you want to. You can have it be 4:3 if you want. I really like the nice square aspect ratio of 1:1. You can adjust the size. I just have mine set to the middle of the road size-wise. And then you can also put a border around your camera if you want, and a drop shadow. And I like that it kind of just, it makes it hover over the content a little bit better for you. So if I were to put this behind it, you can see there's a little bit of a drop shadow on this rounded rectangle, which makes it just look a little bit more professional in my opinion. Now, down here at the bottom, this is the opacity setting. So do you want it to be fully opaque like I have right now? Or you can actually make yourself a little bit transparent if you want. So this is 50% transparency. You can see through me into the thing that's behind my picture-in-picture. I chose mine to be opaque. And then what I want it to do is when I hover over it, I want it to go to 0% opacity. So mine completely fades away and completely comes back. But you can even control that. You could set it to 50%. And now whenever you move your cursor over the window, it just dims it a little bit. It doesn't make it go away entirely. But I like to have it go away completely. And then there's a blur that you can add to it. So say that I set it to like 80%. When I hover over, it's actually going to blur out my face when my cursor is over there. Well, you could do strong or you can do whatever. I just had it set to normal because mine completely fades away. So the blurring doesn't really matter at all. It kind of blurs as it fades out. And then just like Keystroke Pro, I have this set to a specific location on my screen. Again, I'm only ever sharing my laptop screen in a Teams meeting or in a broadcast. So I only want to show my picture-in-picture on this one monitor. And I chose to have mine in the lower left-hand corner because that's just my preference. So you can select where you want it. You can put it in the middle, put it on the right-hand side, wherever you want on screen. And then you can adjust how much spacing there is around the bottom corner of the window. So I can set it to tiny and it kind of moves it down a little bit. Spaceless is going to push it all the way to the edge of the monitor. I like to have just a very small space, just a little bit of a border around my camera. And that is mirror magnet, where you can have a picture-in-picture built in regardless of what tool you're using to broadcast, record, or do a video conferencing meeting. The fourth thing, the last thing that I want to talk about, is actually made by a different company. It's not by this same gentleman from Germany. It's from a application called Presentify. And that is my little annotation icon right here. If I want to be able to draw on my screen and highlight something, then I would press the pen button. And for me, that's the Control A hotkey is what I set it to. Again, I don't worry about what the hotkeys are. I press the pencil icon or the pen icon whenever I want to draw on my screen. And this is what it looks like. If I press the pen key, I get a little bit of a toolbar across the top where I can choose what colors I want to draw with. I can have it randomize. I can choose if I want to do squiggly lines, if I want to do shapes, or if I want to draw arrows on my screen. And I can also add text and I can erase my drawing. So the typical way that I use this is I usually will press the button and then I'll just start clicking and drawing on my screen. And I'll say like, okay, here's what we're going to talk about is this OBS section inside a Stream Deck. And we're going to add a button right here to the upper corner. That's my YouTube button. And I can basically draw and circle things on my screen. That's typically how I use it, but there's a lot more uses for this. You can click the little arrow button and you can draw an arrow to point to something if you want to. If you don't want to like draw a box around manually, you can use the shape tool to draw a rectangle, or you can draw a circle around something to highlight it. And then you can even hit the text button and you can say, this is a cool feature. And you can show text on the screen if you want. And then whenever you're done drawing, if it doesn't fade away automatically, go back over here. If this isn't fading away automatically, you can press the eraser key to make it go away immediately. Now, the other thing that a lot of people use that I don't use all that often is while this toolbar is activated, if I press my W key, it will go into whiteboarding mode. And this gives me this nice gray background where I can draw things on the screen and I can show in a whiteboard format. So I'm not actually drawing on top of windows and all of that. I'm drawing on top of just a blank canvas, and that's the whiteboarding functionality. Let's look at the settings for Presentify real quick. And that's this little icon that kind of looks like a projector screen. So if I go into preferences for Presentify, Oh, I actually have to turn it off so I can move my window out of the way. I have it set again to open up at login, and I want it to show the little toolbar whenever it pops up. I want to see those tools because I can't remember really what the keystrokes are. Whenever I'm annotating, my favorite colors are pink, blue, and green because those have the highest contrast. I like to have a nice bold line because I'm sharing my screen inside of a Teams meeting. People might be on a laptop screen. They might not be able to see very well. So I have the biggest line possible. And then my whiteboarding color, I like to have a dark background because I think the lines kind of pop against that dark background really nicely. And then what I find is that I do a lot of drawing where I'm going to circle something and then I'm going to forget about it and keep talking. So I want that line to fade away automatically. So I have it set here to erase automatically after 2 seconds. So whenever I release my mouse button, it's going to fade away 2 seconds later. Under the cursor, you can actually use this utility to highlight your cursor as well. But honestly, I don't use that myself. So I'm not going to talk about how that works. I prefer Cursor Pro for my cursor highlighting. And then here's the keyboard shortcuts where you can annotate your screen. You can show and hide the menu bar, show and hide the whiteboard. You can change what color you're going to do or change the tool that you're using. There's a lot of things it can do. What I would recommend if you're going to annotate your screen a whole lot, I would recommend that on your Stream Deck, you maybe have a button over here. Whoops. You maybe have a button to activate it, but what you could do is you could activate it and switch to a new page on your Stream Deck, and then you could have those tools on the menu bar mapped to the keyboard shortcuts. You could just have physical buttons for them so that people don't see the menu bar, but you see it on your desk and you're using a Stream Deck to switch around and navigate around like a pro. So that is Presentify, and that one is $4.99 on the Mac App Store. So it's $5 for that one. So all of my tools that I use, I've bought other ones that kind of fell aside. All of the tools that I bought were $9 for the mouse, $9 for the keyboard, $9 for the camera, and $5 for the annotation thing. And I just want to call out the annotation Presentify application. I actually discovered this from Andy Honeycutt. He was doing this. He's way better than me at remembering, all of the shortcuts and how to draw on screen because he does a lot more teaching than I do. And he showed me this. I was wowed by it. So he forwarded me over what that link is. So thank you, Andy, if you're watching. I really appreciate having this application. Now, when it comes to buying the apps from this guy, Martin, what I would recommend is buying the bundle because it's a little bit cheaper than buying the apps individually or buying the apps separately. What was it? $9, $9, and $9. So you're $27 if you just use those 3 applications. Well, he has a bundle on the Mac App Store where you can buy the screen recording toolkit, and it will include all 3 of those applications, but also an application that prevents your Mac from going to sleep automatically. It keeps it awake for a duration that you set, so it's kind of a bonus app. And all of those applications together are $24. So that's how I actually purchased this. I spent $24 plus $5, so I spent $29, and now I've got this amazing toolkit to highlight my cursor, keyboard, show my camera, annotate on the screen, and then a couple shortcuts to move my windows around, all powered by my Stream Deck. And that's how I do my demonstrations for Microsoft 365. So I hope this video helped you out. If you're one of those guys who are a Mac user and you do a lot of teaching or a lot of demonstrating and you want to show your cursor or show things in a cool way, I hope these utilities help you out. And let me know in the comments below if you have other utilities that you use that I might be interested in. I'm always on the hunt for cool new things to use on my Mac that kind of give me an edge as a technical communicator. So thank you for watching. I hope you have a great new year and a great 2022, and we'll see you in the next video.